Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The John Allen Show, brought to you by the fantastic folks at the Word on Fire Institute of Bishop Robert Barron. I am John Allen. I'm the editor of Crux. We're an independent online Catholic news agency. You can find us at cruxnow.com. That is cruxnow.com. We try to be your one-stop shopping destination for the best in smart, wired, and independent Catholic journalism. I am also the host of The Crux of the Matter on the Catholic Channel, Sirius XM 129. We air Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern, so if you're by a radio at that hour and you're a Sirius subscriber, do try to spend an hour of your week with us. We'd love to have you. I am also a proud fellow at the Word on Fire Institute. You can find their resources at wordonfire.institute. That is wordonfire.institute. You'll find the latest and greatest from Bishop Barron, much more beyond. Bookmark it, spend some time there, you won't regret it. I've been on vacation for a week. My wife and I did the traditional Italian thing this summer. We spent a couple days at the beach, a town called Senigallia on the Adriatic coast, and then we headed north, a place called Courmayeur, which is in the far north of Italy in the Alps near the border with France and Switzerland. A lot has happened while I've been away. I am back in Rome, and I am broadcasting once again from the studios of our good friends at Longbeard. They are a digital marketing and design company, a great friend of this program, and a great friend of Catholic enterprises everywhere. Their studios here in the Eternal City are right cheek by jowl with the great Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, St. Mary Major. And there in the Borghese Chapel, you will find the famous icon of Maria Salus Populi Romani. She is the protector of the city of Rome, and over the centuries has always been there for Rome in moments of crisis. We like to place this show under her maternal care as well, so Maria Salus Populi Romani, ora pro nobis. All right, as I mentioned, since I've been away, there's a lot going on, so I'm going to do what I normally do on the show. I'm going to lay out a menu for you of 3 news stories that are sort of percolating in the Catholic bloodstream right now, and then when we come back, we'll unpack each of them and try to make sense of what's going on. But because I snuck away for a week, I also feel I owe you a bonus item. So at the bottom of the show, I am going to tell you the craziest Catholic story you have never heard. It's also, in my opinion, the answer to the greatest Catholic bar bit of all time. You're not going to want to miss it, so stick around. But first, our menu. So a couple stories this week out of the United States. One involves the Sacrament of Baptism. Earlier this month, the Vatican put out a statement saying that anyone who is baptized with the formula, "We baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit," instead of the traditional, "I baptize you," with the priest acting in the person of Christ, anyone who was baptized that way, that baptism was not valid, and they have to be baptized again. Now, that may seem like just a fussy bit of house cleaning to you, but don't try to tell that to Father Matthew Hood of the Archdiocese of Detroit, who was baptized using that formula, which meant that he was never baptized. Therefore, he was never ordained to the priesthood, and therefore, the sacraments he celebrated for people for 3 years were not valid. It's created endless headaches. We will unpack all of that. I also think there's a lesson for attempts at church reform here, and we'll talk about that as well. Second story involves the Diocese of Wheeling, West Virginia, that was rocked by scandal and controversy 2 years ago when Bishop Michael Bransfield resigned amid allegations of sexual harassment of seminarians and priests in the diocese, and also financial impropriety, basically living too high on the hog and getting the diocese to pay for a whole bunch of things that a Catholic bishop probably should not be expensing to the flock that he leads. Now, a Vatican investigation followed 2 years later. Bishop Bransfield has issued a public apology, sort of, and has paid back the money that the diocese claims it is owed, sort of. Both of those moves have come in for some criticism, but there is also hope they may promote healing in the diocese. We'll talk about all of that. And finally, here in the Vatican, late August typically is the peak of the summer doldrums. Almost nothing happens. But Pope Francis, legendarily, has no off switch. So the fact that the institution isn't doing very much doesn't mean he's gone quiet. In fact, he's using this downtime to do what the Pope loves to do, which is to make cold calls or to write cold letters. That is, people who have never solicited any kind of contact with the Pope, nevertheless, will hear from him. He's written to an Argentine shrine. He's called a bishop in Mozambique. He's written to a nun he knows at Argentina. And he's written to some friends about the death of the famous Argentine priest. We'll go through all of that. So that's the menu. We're going to take a short break, but stick around because when we come back, I will start serving the plates.
Hey everybody, this is Jared Zimmer, the director of the Word on Fire Institute. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the John Allen Show, yet another production brought to you by the Word on Fire Institute. I wanted to just take a minute of your time to tell you a little bit about what you receive as a member of the Institute. So the Institute exists to be a formation arm of Bishop Barron's apostolate Word on Fire. We offer specialized courses in theology, philosophy, spirituality, practical evangelization, numerous other topics to help form you to be the best evangelist that you can be. Along with those courses, you have a lively forum where you can discuss the courses with the other students as well as the professors. You also get a quarterly journal called Evangelization and Culture. In that journal, we have interviews with folks such as Dave Rubin, Dr. Arthur Brooks. We discuss culture and cinema, you name it. We will bring it to you, again, as another tool to help you learn good evangelization in the modern world. Along with your membership, you also get free access to Word on Fire Digital. We're talking about hundreds of hours of Bishop Barron's content, so his feature films, his study series. You also get a free book, Bishop Barron's latest book called Centered, really diving deep into the spirituality of Word on Fire. So be sure to go to wordonfire.institute to learn more, and we'd love to see you inside.
Welcome back. So as I mentioned at the top of the show, our first news story this week comes out of the United States. It's set in the Archdiocese of Detroit. Now, to connect the dots, we really, however, have to start on August 6th, because it was August 6th that the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, that's the main doctrinal watchdog agency here, led by Spanish Cardinal Luis Ladadia, issued a response to what are known as dubia. It's a Latin word that means doubts, and these are questions that bishops or other parties from time to time will submit to the Vatican looking for clarification on something that they're just not clear about. In this case, two questions were submitted to the Congregation for the Faith. The first was whether somebody who was baptized using the formula, "We baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit," the "we" in this instance referring to the parents, the godparents, the grandparents, the extended family, the whole community, whether someone baptized using that formula was baptized validly. The answer was no. And the second question was whether somebody baptized using that formula had to be baptized again. The answer was yes. Now, that struck a chord for Father Matthew Hood, who was ordained to the priesthood in 2017 for the Archdiocese of Detroit, because back in April, he had watched a family video of his own baptism about 30 years before. And he distinctly remembered that the deacon who presided over that baptism, a guy by the name of Deacon Mark Springer, had used just that formula. "We baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." So Father Hood did what he was supposed to do. He went to the Archdiocese, and the answer came back, "Look, we're very sorry, but you were not validly baptized. Therefore, you were not validly ordained to the priesthood in 2017. And the sacraments you've celebrated over the last 3 years as the associate pastor of 2 parishes in the Archdiocese, most of those sacraments are probably invalid, and people are going to have to get them again." It set off a ripple effect. Now, Father Hood's situation, fortunately, was rectified fairly quickly. He was immediately baptized. Shortly thereafter, he was confirmed. Shortly after that, he was ordained as a transitional deacon, and then he was ordained to the priesthood. So his situation is good to go. But that doesn't address the situation of people, for instance, who went to confession to Father Hood during those 3 years, who never received sacramental absolution. People whose weddings were officiated by Father Hood, who may or may not, depending on their circumstances, have to go through that again. People he confirmed who now have to seek the sacrament of confirmation again. Ironically enough, the one case that is not really affected here are people fatherhood baptized, because church teaching is you don't necessarily need a priest. That's the ordinary practice, but any person, including a lay person, can perform a baptism. So those baptisms are valid. But of course, all those people who were baptized by Deacon Springer over the course of about 10 years, they were never validly baptized, so they too are not only going to have to seek baptism again, but whatever other sacraments they may have received, they're probably going to have to repeat those as well. In other words, all of this caused an enormous mess. Now, I think the lesson here for people who want to try to reform the church in some way, and let's be clear, the church is full of would-be reformers, and that's one of its glories. The fact that people care so passionately about the Catholic Church, they're so invested in it that they want to push the church to be the best version of itself as they would see it. That is a wonderful thing. That energy, that passion, that keeps the church alive. But if you were one of those people who wants to be involved in some kind of reform campaign, whatever it is, whether it's, it's the liturgy, or it's our theology, or it's the intersection with faith and politics, or the distribution of power in the church, the role of women, the role of the lay, whatever, whatever your cause may be, I think the lesson here is look before you leap. Now, Deacon Springer is now retired. He is no longer in active ministry, and he has not spoken about this situation. But one has to presume that his motives back in the day for using that formula, the "we baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit," was that he wanted to empower the community. He wanted to recognize the foundational role that the family and the broader community have to play in the life of faith of the infant he was baptizing. He was trying to serve the people. It's just, unfortunately, in so doing, he has created headaches for a very large number of those people. He has caused them unnecessary grief and in some cases heart sickness. So the lesson here is do not destroy the village in order to save it. By all means, push the church to reform, but make sure the steps you are taking to serve that cause don't end up doing more harm than good. All right, our second story this week also comes out of the United States. It involves the Diocese of Wheeling, West Virginia, and the somewhat sad story of its former bishop, Bishop Mark Bransfield. Bishop Bransfield was appointed to Wheeling in 2005, served 13 years until his resignation in 2018. Now, that resignation came amid accusations of a broad variety of misconduct. It included alleged sexual harassment of seminarians and priests, adults, so we're not talking sexual abuse of a minor, but nevertheless sexual harassment. Those allegations were deemed by an investigation to be credible. Further, he was accused of expensing all sorts of things to the diocese to support a lifestyle that is probably inappropriate for a Catholic bishop. These included, a fairly healthy liquor tab and expensive vacations and so forth and so on. All told, once Bishop Bransfield resigned, when the diocese did its own internal accounting, they felt that they were owed about $800,000 from the bishop for various things that had been expensed during his 13-year term. A Vatican-ordered investigation ensued, led by Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore, which in the main found the allegations against Bransfield to be supported by the evidence. Pope Francis not only removed Bransfield as the bishop of the diocese, but also ordered him to refrain from any form of public ministry, so he was essentially suspended, at least in terms of being able to function as a bishop or a priest in public. And it was also recommended as part of that process that the bishop issue an apology. So flash forward 2 years later, here we are in August 2020, the Diocese of Wheeling on its website released a letter from Bishop Bransfield that was intended to be that apology. He apologized for hard feelings that may have resulted, poor impressions of the diocese or of himself, his actions may have inadvertently created, and so on. Now, all of that, to be honest, was seen as insufficient, at least by some. Certainly, advocacy groups for the victims of clerical sexual abuse and harassment were not satisfied. They felt that, in effect, this was Bransfield's attempt to defend himself. They found it to be a half-hearted apology, because what he was really apologizing for was misimpressions or hurt feelings that his behavior might have caused, not the behavior itself. And so whether or not this apology was enough, whether it did the trick, that, alas, is a matter of debate. Also, Bishop Bransfield did make a payment to the Diocese of Wheeling, but it wasn't everything the diocese was looking for. The diocese wanted about $792,000. Bishop Bransfield paid back $441,000, which he felt, based upon his own, the counsel he had received and his own sense of things, he felt that's what he actually owed. The diocese has not commented, but you have to imagine that the accountants there probably aren't totally thrilled. Nevertheless, the diocese did say that that payment was approved by the Congregation for Bishops here in Rome, and so that's undoubtedly the last word, at least in terms of the financial end of the equation. Now, of course, the saga here doesn't just involve Bishop Bransfield personally, because the situation created enormous lasting consequences for the diocese there in Wheeling. It divided people in the pews. It created a very negative impression of the church and the broader community. Undoubtedly compromised the church's effectiveness to be a witness on all manner of issues, to say nothing of the administrative difficulties it had, compromising its ability to raise funds and so on. And one hopes that these most recent gestures, however unsatisfying they may have been to some, will nevertheless eventually lead to a kind of healing in Wheeling, if you'll pardon the pun, sort of, turn a page for the diocese and allow it to move forward. All right. Third story I promised you is a Vatican, well, it's not really a Vatican story, it's more a Pope story, because as I mentioned at the top of the show, things tend to come grinding to a halt in the Vatican in late August. Everyone is out of town on vacation. But Pope Francis, legendarily the Pope of the staycation, has remained active, and in recent days, almost on a daily basis, some news story has been cropping up of some cold call or cold letter that he has sent to someone. There are at least 4 on the record in just the last few days. So he wrote to a famous shrine, a pilgrimage destination in Argentina, devoted to Saint Raimondo Nonato, who is a saint very close to Pope Francis, someone, a figure he had become devoted to while he was in Argentina. This is a pilgrimage destination that a lot of newlyweds go to because of the story about Saint Raimondo, who was born under unusual circumstances, and his life was essentially saved by someone who intervened. And Pope Francis basically said to newlyweds that, look, if you're trying to have kids, my recommendation is that you pray to St. Raimondo Nonato, and if possible, go to his shrine and offer up some prayers there. Get the saint on your side. In effect, it was the Pope's fertility program for newlywed couples. All right, his second cold call was to a bishop, a Brazilian bishop, Bishop Lisboa, who was serving in Mozambique, whose diocese, to say it is in distress, is a significant understatement. First of all, it has vast poverty. Secondly, it was just hit by a cyclone, a devastating cyclone. Third, it has been rocked in recent months by a militant Muslim insurgency that has prompted a very strong response from the government. Bishop Lisboa, as a good pastor, has tried to be outspoken in defense of the interests of his people. For his trouble, the government-owned press in Mozambique has come after him, accusing him, in effect, of being a traitor. In that context, the fact that the Pope called to give him a thumbs up has clear political subtext. It's a way for the Pope to say, look, if you mess with this guy, you're not just messing with an isolated bishop, you're messing with me, you're messing with the global Catholic Church. I'm sure he hopes that will have some kind of deterrent effect. Third cold call. The Pope wrote to a religious woman, a nun he knows in Argentina, who has recently opened a home for transgender women. That is, individuals who were born anatomically as women, but who believe themselves to be, or discovered themselves to be, transgender. Many of them in Argentina end up as, and across the world really, end up as victims of prostitution and human trafficking. So this nun has opened a home to try to lure them away from prostitution and help them build a better future. The Pope wrote her a letter basically to give her a thumbs up, to say, I hear about what you're doing, like it, support it, keep going. Obviously, that will be very helpful to this nun. And then finally, the Pope wrote to some friends in Argentina following the August 16th death of a well-known Argentine priest by the name of Julian Zini, who was a poet and also one of the forerunners of what is known in Argentina as the theology of the people. It's kind of the Argentinian form of liberation theology, putting the church on the side of the poor in their struggles for human dignity and for social justice. The Pope referred to Father Zini as Argentina's great poet of the people and talked about the importance of his legacy, how he's going to be missed, the importance of preserving his memory, and so on. Another way for Pope Francis to put into action, in effect, those memorable words he spoke after his election in March 2013, when he said, "How I dream of a poor church for the poor." I think he believes Father Zini was one of the early apostles of that ecclesiastical vision, and so it's very important to Pope Francis that his legacy be preserved and that young priests in particular be encouraged to follow in his footsteps, to follow the example that he set. All right, now that's the week's news, but I promised you a bonus item. So here we go. When I was in Senegalia on vacation with my wife, we were sitting innocently at a restaurant by the beach having a delicious lunch of seafood. And when we were done, we asked for what the Italians call a digestivo. It's a kind of after-dinner liqueur you have after a meal. Theoretically, it's supposed to help you digest. In all honesty, I think it's just an excuse to keep drinking after you finished your bottle of wine. But in any event, that's what we did. We had a particular one in mind, but the waiter offered us a local digestivo, and we said sure. It was delicious. We asked what it was called. It was called canaya. Now, I had no idea what that word meant, so I asked. It turns out that it is a term in dialect for the Italian word caniglia, which basically means jerk. It sort of means scoundrel, scofflaw, rapscallion, ne'er-do-well, that kind of thing. Seemed a curious name for an Amaro. So I went on kind of a little journey of discovery. Turns out that it has that name because Senegalia, the city we were in, its kind of unofficial civil motto is Senegalia, mezzo Ebrea e mezzo canaya, meaning half Jewish and half rascals. And it goes back to the 15th century when the lord of that part of Italy was a guy by the name of Sigismondo Pandolfo Malatesta. And he had a problem. Senegalia had been hit by malaria. There was an incredibly high death rate. It was basically depopulated, and he needed to fill it back up. So his idea was, well, I'll give tax incentives to Jews to come from Rome and elsewhere in Italy to set up businesses here, and I will decree a general amnesty. So anyone who is fleeing the law anyplace, if they can make it to Senegalia, okay, the slate will be wiped clean and they can start over here. And the plan worked. The city filled up with Jews and with scofflaws. Now, that led me to be interested in this guy, Malatesta. And here's the crazy Catholic story. It turns out that Sigismondo Malatesta was the recipient of history's only reverse canonization. Yeah, you heard me right. Reverse canonization, also known as an infernal canonization. Basically, you know what a normal canonization is. A pope declares that a particular saint is in heaven. Well, a reverse canonization is when a pope declares that a particular sinner is either already in hell or is definitively going to hell. Now, as I say, this has only happened once. It was April 1472. Pope Pius II was so enraged by Sigismundo Malatesta that he decided a simple excommunication wasn't enough. He'd already excommunicated him once, and it clearly didn't work. And he was just so out of his mind with frustration about this guy who was repeatedly defying papal edicts, even though theoretically he was part of the papal states and he owed his fealty to the Pope, that Pope Pius II decided he had to invent something new. Now, he had just canonized St. Catherine of Siena, who was, he was from Siena as well, so it was the patron saint of his hometown. The whole canonization ritual was very fresh in his mind. So he decided, why not just stand it on its head? And so he organized this ritual where he declared definitively that Malatesta was going to hell. And to punctuate the point, he had Malatesta burned in effigy in 3 different piazzas in Rome, the Piazza del Popolo, the Campo dei Fiori, and St. Peter's Square, with a kind of placard around his neck that read, "Here is the king of traitors and the spawn of the devil." How do you know that a pope is unhappy with you? Ladies and gentlemen, I think that was a pretty good clue. Now, Pius II himself, later in life, when he wrote his memoirs, he is, by the way, the only pope to write his own autobiography in church history. Pius II was very much a man of the Renaissance, a man of the classics. Earlier in life, he wrote courtly love poetry in Latin and in Greek and so on. And in his memoirs, he himself acknowledged that he wasn't 100% sure that this reverse canonization was valid. And he acknowledged it was a kind of ironic form of speech. But he went on to say, nevertheless, that this Malatesta dude was just so objectionable, he didn't really feel he had any choice. Now, folks, moral of the story is this. Cardinal Francis George, the late Cardinal Francis George of Chicago, once said to me that in the Catholic Church, over more than 2,000 years of history, absolutely everything has happened at least once. Now, I used to have my doubts, but the story of Sigismundo Pandolfo Malatesta, Pope Pius II, and the reverse canonization, I think, is the ultimate exclamation point that just when you think something is too crazy to actually have happened in the Catholic Church, it actually has. All right, that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. Please be with us in a fortnight. In the meantime, stay healthy, stay safe, have a blessed 2 weeks, and we will be together again soon.